For years, sailors saw orcas as harmless onlookers, gliding near boats without causing harm. But that belief has shattered as vessels off Spain and Portugal are being rammed, damaged, and even sunk. These deliberate strikes, targeting rudders and crippling hulls, seem far from random. Are orcas adapting to human presence, or is something deeper behind this alarming behavior? A series of unsettling incidents began in mid-2020 near the Strait of Gibraltar, where the Atlantic meets the Mediterranean. This area has always been a busy route for cargo ships, fishing boats, and leisure craft. While local fishers occasionally spotted orcas passing through, the whales rarely showed any aggression. That changed abruptly when a small sailing boat radioed a distress call, saying orcas had slammed into its hull multiple times. The skipper, a British national en route to a coastal marina, first noticed unusual splashing in the distance. Moments later, a heavy thud rocked the vessel. He rushed to the stern, suspecting a collision with a floating log or submerged debris. Instead, he spotted the unmistakable dorsal fins of orcas. They were not drifting lazily. One of the whales was actively pushing against the rudder. Alarmed, the skipper tried to steer away, but the wheel felt unresponsive. Radio in hand, he sent a mayday signal identifying his position and explaining that orcas were targeting the boat. Nearby authorities expressed surprise, having never fielded such a call. Meanwhile, the crew did everything they could to deter the whales, banging pots, altering speed, even cutting the engine. None of those tactics stopped the repeated strikes that shook the hull, each impact echoing through the cabin. After several minutes of tense waiting, the orcas paused. Hoping that was the end, the skipper turned the key to restart the engine, only to feel another violent jolt. The entire rudder assembly tore free, allowing water to seep in. Fearing a breach, the crew prepared life jackets, emergency flares, and the life raft, unsure if the boat would remain afloat. The orcas continued to circle, occasionally bumping the hull as though testing the vessel's vulnerabilities. Eventually, a Spanish maritime patrol boat reached the location. The orcas slipped away, vanishing beneath the waves. A towing operation followed, bringing the crippled sailboat into port. On land, a shocked gathering inspected the damage. The rudder looked as if it had been bitten off, bearing deep marks. Experts who examined the remains proposed that the orcas had deliberately struck that key area. Such precision hinted at more than random curiosity. The incident made headlines, sparking debates about a sudden change in orca behavior. Scientists offered initial theories, suggesting it could be playful exploration gone too far or a stress response caused by diminished fish stocks. Still, the severity of the attack felt more deliberate than a simple game. Locals started asking whether this was a single freak event or the start of something bigger. Within weeks, they had their answer. Reports of further incidents trickled in. It was evident that a pattern was emerging, one with unsettling implications for all who ventured through these waters. Soon after the first shocking incident, word spread quickly among skippers traveling from Cadiz to Galicia. In the latter part of 2020, a second attack made global news when a sailboat ended up sinking after a fierce encounter with orcas. This event deeply rattled the sailing community, confirming that the earlier assault was not an isolated flare-up. On a clear afternoon, a French-flagged yacht with 2 experienced sailors on board cruised northward along the Spanish coastline. The sea was calm and the wind steady, ideal conditions for a pleasant passage. Without warning, the yacht shuddered. One sailor dashed to the stern, glimpsing a large black dorsal fin scraping against the hull. Realizing orcas were involved, they tried altering course, hoping distance might deter the whales. Instead, 3 orcas shadowed the vessel, focusing on the rudder. The crew felt a steady pounding from beneath. Attempts to scare them off, revving the engine, yelling, or tapping on the sides, proved futile. Each time the boat picked up speed, an orca would ram the rudder with renewed force, almost as if determined to disable it completely. Soon, the steering became erratic, and the wheel spun freely. Water seeped through the damaged stern, causing the boat to stop. Panicking, the crew radioed for help, describing the orca's deliberate strikes. A salvage tug set out to assist. It would take time to arrive, but every new jolt caused more flooding in the yacht's interior. The sailors threw emergency gear onto the deck, preparing to abandon ship if the hull breached, but the orcas showed no sign of leaving. One orca even rose near the surface, blowing a loud spout of air. This left the impression that the group was coordinating, ensuring the craft could not escape. When the tug finally reached the scene, the sailboat was already low in the water. The rescuers managed to evacuate the shaken sailors onto the tug, but salvage attempts failed. The orcas had inflicted too much harm. The rudder post had broken away, and water surged in. Minutes later, the yacht dipped beneath the waves, lost to the depths. No one was injured, but the crew watched in disbelief as the boat vanished. A testament to the unexpected power of these marine predators. The sinking intensified experts' concerns. Some pointed to reduced tuna populations, possibly pressuring orcas to approach and investigate boats. Others proposed a learned behavior triggered by trauma. Perhaps an orca had been hit by a vessel and began targeting rudders in retaliation. More astonishing was the idea that orcas might be teaching each other these techniques, as they are known for passing knowledge through pods. Local authorities warned mariners to monitor orca sightings and approach them with caution, if at all. Official bulletins highlighted guidelines: slow down, keep quiet, and radio for help if orcas seemed too interested. Yet none of these measures guaranteed safety. Fear rippled through sailing circuits. If orcas could sink one boat so decisively, what else were they capable of? In the months following these initial attacks, rumors spread about a specific orca nicknamed White Gladys. Sailors and researchers alike spoke of this unusually assertive whale appearing off southern Spain, flanked by a group that demonstrated remarkable coordination. The name surfaced when several mariners described a pale patch on the orca's back, distinct from typical orca markings. Some claimed White Gladys led her pod in bold, purposeful encounters with unsuspecting vessels. A British skipper who had recently crossed from Tangier to Tarifa recounted his heart-pounding experience. Shortly after sunrise, he felt a jarring impact that shook the cabin. Rushing topside, he saw multiple fins circling, including one with a notable pale marking. His immediate thought was to reduce noise, so he cut the engine. Yet the orcas persisted, pressing against the rudder with relentless force. It felt less like random curiosity and more like a coordinated effort to break the steering system. To calm the whales, the skipper and his mate avoided shouting or banging. They tried idle drifting, hoping the pod would lose interest. For a moment, the orcas withdrew, then returned with renewed force. White Gladys led two smaller orcas in tight loops around the stern, each taking turns bumping the rudder. The skipper described the attack as methodical, as if they had a plan for disabling the yacht. He radioed the Coast Guard, explaining that orcas were ramming his boat. On the other end, disbelief filled the operator's silence. Just a year prior, such calls were practically unheard of. With no immediate rescue vessel nearby, the skipper braced for the worst. Gradually, the orcas seemed to slow. White Gladys approached the stern, pressing her body sideways against the hull. The boat tilted, water lapped over the deck, and the crew feared they would capsize. Miraculously, the hull held firm. Then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, the pod vanished, leaving deep scratches and a chipped rudder. When the boat limped into port, onlookers stared at the extensive damage. Marine biologists inspected the vessel and found bite marks consistent with orca teeth. The partial removal of the rudder's protective casing indicated significant force. Sailors swapping stories on the dock warned each other to stay alert if they saw orcas. Above all, they advised, watch out for that unique pale patch, White Gladys. Speculation ran wild. Had White Gladys survived a net entanglement or a boat collision? Was she teaching new tactics to younger orcas, turning them from curious followers into formidable assailants? Some scientists propose that these interactions might be a rare learned behavior passed from older whales to their offspring. Regardless of the true cause, news of White Gladys spread far, leading many to reconsider the safety of boating off Iberia's coast. Southern shores, while local communities had grown concerned, global awareness soared following a high-profile event in 2022 involving a German-flagged yacht sailing near the Portuguese coast. The skipper and crew found themselves bombarded by orcas in broad daylight. Media outlets worldwide reported the story, showing pictures of gaping holes in the hull and a missing rudder. Suddenly, these Iberian orca attacks were on everyone's lips. Witnesses described how the orcas struck the boat in calculated waves, focusing their force on the same vulnerable point, the rudder. Despite attempts to fend them off by shifting course and lowering sails, the crew could only watch as their steering system gave out. The terrified sailors braced for potential flooding. A rescue ship dispatched by the Portuguese Maritime Authority arrived just before sunset, towing the damaged vessel into a nearby port. The battered yacht was declared unfit for further travel, illustrating how destructive these animals could be. The media coverage led to debates among marine experts. Could this be a short-term behavioral glitch within a single orca group, or did it signal a shift across orca populations in the region? Some scientists reminded the public that orcas are highly intelligent and may experiment with new behaviors. Others argue that human activities like overfishing or habitat intrusion could trigger aggression. Meanwhile, conspiracy theories abounded with sensational claims that orcas were organizing a revenge campaign. Maritime authorities throughout Spain and Portugal issued fresh advisories. Boaters were told to proceed at low speeds if orcas were sighted, avoid sudden changes in engine noise, and promptly alert rescue services if contact seemed likely. Still, no definitive strategy guaranteed safety. Government officials considered installing listening stations to track known pods and warn vessels in real time. Yet orcas can move quickly, sometimes covering large swaths of ocean in short periods, making detection difficult. The tourism and charter sectors felt the impact as well. Tour operators canceled or rerouted trips, citing the unpredictability of orca encounters. Coastal communities relying on sailing tourism grew anxious, fearing a drop in visitors. Eco groups expressed sadness that orcas were receiving negative attention after decades of being seen as gentle around humans. They urged balanced coverage to prevent panic and preserve orca protections under national and EU laws. Within academic circles, a meeting was held in late 2022 gathering marine biologists, oceanographers, and local authorities. Discussions ranged from tagging orcas for real-time monitoring to analyzing the conditions of each attack. A partial consensus emerged. The phenomenon likely involved a few pods with specific learned tactics. Whether it might spread across broader orca populations remained uncertain. By early 2023, the list of orca attacks in the Iberian region had grown alarmingly long. Reports trickled in from near the Bay of Tegues, the Atlantic edges of Portugal, and even beyond the Strait of Gibraltar. In several cases, crews described partial or total sinkings, leaving them stranded at sea until rescue arrived. Footage emerged online capturing the haunting sounds of orcas ramming hulls while stunned sailors yelled for help. This dramatic evidence challenged old assumptions about orcas being harmless to humans. One particular case involved a small sloop crossing from Morocco to Spain. The skipper, an adventurous solo sailor, felt an abrupt crash that nearly knocked him off his feet. Looking overboard, he saw a group of orcas circling. Terrified, he tried turning off all electronics to reduce noise, hoping they would lose interest. The orcas continued targeting the stern. He managed to record brief video clips on his phone, later posted on social media and viewed millions of times. These clips showed orcas relentlessly pounding the back end of the boat as if zeroing in on a single weak point. Local maritime authorities responded to the frantic mayday, but with orcas attacking in quick intervals, the sloop began taking on water. By the time a patrol craft arrived, the stern was severely compromised and the sailor had abandoned the ship for his life raft. Thankfully, he was rescued unharmed, though in shock, watching from a distance as his sloop sank below the surface. The orcas vanished shortly thereafter, leaving behind shattered dreams and a stark reminder that no vessel is guaranteed safe. Word spread that orcas might be expanding their range. Some even wondered if these tactics could appear in new pods away from Iberia. Experts debated the root cause, dwindling fish stocks, collisions, or an accidental start that became a learned pattern. The idea that orcas could teach one another how to disable boats sparked alarm among anyone setting sail in these waters. Many mariners felt powerless, stuck between environmental respect and self-preservation. Official guidelines recommended slowing speed or shutting off engines, but success stories were scarce. At scientific forums, the discussion grew more intense. One side believed these attacks were a localized phenomenon caused by a small group of orcas reacting to trauma. Others hypothesized a broader movement tied to ecological shifts, possibly spurring orcas to see boats as competition or threats. Meanwhile, sailors formed online communities to share sightings, post real-time warnings, and gather new tips on fending off orcas. Some recounted partial victories where cutting all vibrations minimized damage, but even that approach was no silver bullet. These alarming attacks paint a complex picture. Orcas, long respected for their intelligence, appear to be targeting vital parts of vessels with precision. In each episode, rudders took the brunt, suggesting the whales understand exactly how to disable a boat. Whether their actions stem from curiosity, learned aggression, or past trauma remains uncertain. Historically, wild orcas rarely harmed humans at sea, yet current events in Spain and Portugal challenge that comforting belief. Some speculate these pods feel threatened by declining fish stocks or rising boat traffic, possibly driving them toward open conflict. Others point to the notion of social transmission. One whale experiences harm and then teaches her offspring or peers how to retaliate. Sailors in the region now tread warily, updating navigation plans and preparing for any sign of dorsal fins. Conservationists also worry about potential overreactions, such as calls for harsh deterrent measures that could harm orcas. Real solutions may lie in deeper research, analyzing pod structures, mapping out orca routes, and ensuring that local communities are better informed. If you enjoyed this video, watch our next one shown on screen.